Hey, I just wanted to say before this video starts, this is not a lecture on Carl Jung, sobriety, or even self-help. I'm trying to explain a shift that happened into my life that I didn't really understand at the time. I thought my anxiety and fear were things that I thought they were character defects. I thought they were things I had to medicate or suppress in some way. I thought it was something I had to outgrow, and eventually I stopped you know asking how to get rid of these anxieties and fears, and I started to ask like what they wanted from me. And that's what I mean when I talk about integration. It is that I'm learning how to be more honest with a true self rather than trying to maybe spearhead my way through everything. Because it's not about willpower. It is about perspective, and that is the most important part of this piece, I believe. The video isn't super polished. I didn't try to do a lot of editing. I might have cut out some pauses, where I had to reflect for a moment. But it's honest. It's quiet than most things you're probably going to listen to, but I feel like there's a lot of value in here if you care about that kind of thing. At least there was value for me expressing it. I felt it was important, I think, for my channel, if anyone would ever understand where I was coming from or would come from, to kind of tell the story of how I came into crossing the line from compelling to convincing in regards to integration. That's a Carl Jung term. I will often say that I'm a Jungian. That's more so for fun. I just as much agree with Nietzsche. I feel like the more unhealthy parts of me come out when I try to follow like a Nietzsche thing, and people say Nietzsche didn't ask you to follow. But my time with integration, okay? When I was a younger man, I did not know how to cope very well. I had a kind of crazy upbringing. It was not stable whatsoever. And that's just what it is. But along that way, drugs and alcohol was common. And then alcohol really did it for me in a way that I didn't understand. It wasn't for fun. It was to cope. And I didn't realize that. I was surviving. A lot of people don't want to hear that from them people when they're going through it, that they're surviving. I won't say it's a good excuse, but I think it requires some empathy. Anyway, my life got so rough, my mom asked me to go to rehab. And I was old enough to where I tried to respect everything my mom says. So I went to rehab. After that, I got out and joined AA. I went through AA for a little while. I'm sober. I smoke nicotine. I'm working down. That's like a 0.5% or something like that. Now it's crazy low. Doesn't do the job. But I'm working these things out of my life. It started with alcohol. And since alcohol was the most glaring problem in my life, it gave me a good place to start. I will say in hindsight, that is the good thing about alcohol. If you're using it to cope, alcohol will should show you pretty quickly that it's not the way to do it, and that it's actually going to cause you more problems. It took me a long time still to learn that. But after I got out, I went to AA and I did the steps. And the steps was the first time that I was introduced to even the echoes of what integration would be. Because in step 6 and 7, they talk about character defects and shortcomings. And one of them, God can help take away from you. And the other, as mysterious as it may be, God gave to you for a reason. At least that's, the 12 steps. The 12 steps is a, religious framework. So, and it doesn't have to be, but I'm glad it was. Because, one thing AA said was a God of your own understanding. There's like, we don't even care what you believe, dude. Just try. And if any of you hear that, if anyone watches and if anyone hears that and they think, and they scoff. Like, it's just not in your heart. Just let me say I was there, and only through very, very hardcore empirical evidence could I only accept these things now. But that was a path. So integration taught me that, well, step 6 and 7 taught me that there were some things I can do away with, but there are other some things that I should reconsider and maybe wonder why I am that way. That was the beginnings of shadow work. Another thing I'll say about myself is I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of listening, I do a lot of watching of with things that I care about. So after so long, and this is just how my brain works, and maybe others will work this way too, the knowledge starts to compound. And I don't always remember these clear pathways of explaining. So sometimes the vocabulary might get away from me. Sometimes, yeah, I might use the wrong word, but it's really intuitive at this point. And that, I don't want to even make it sound special. I believe all of us can get there. All of us have this intuition, or an intuition. But in AA, it wasn't enough. I was what I considered, I was clean, but I was not sober. Mentally, I was not sober. I was still a dry drunk. And how that manifests itself was fear. There's a lot of a lot of emotions that I try to steer away from even mentioning, because fear is really it. And I learned that in AA too, and through Carl Jung. It's really amazing how much those two intertwined. And if they didn't, I probably would still be in AA. If I didn't find Jung and try to understand, which I'm not claiming I have this huge grasp of now, but I can tell you that I practice it and it works, or it has worked. But when AA failed me in a way, well, because I'll spill a little tea. I'm still a human. I'm not getting joy out of this, but I think it's important context. And I will never speak for AA as a whole, because I think ultimately it's a good for the world. I found really amazing people in it, and people that showed me humanity and grace in times where I did not feel like I deserved it. And in hindsight, I could see that I didn't even accept it. I was too self-hating to let someone love me, and I can still get there. I have a wife, a very beautiful wife, and I find sometimes in my harder moments that I just can't accept the love, or I'm having a trouble accepting that I'm loved by someone. I'm not trying to be sad. I'm just trying to say that there's a headspace, there's an attitude, even an archetype maybe, but I'll leave that for another video. So my crippling anxiety is a call to action for me. I don't have these anxieties where, like, I can't go outside or I can't go to a supermarket. My anxieties are rumination, complete, almost thought obsession, circling these things, trying to figure out what it is that is killing me on the inside. So this anxiety, I always thought I needed to take medicine for, which I'm not going too far off anyway. It's just they said I had crippling anxiety. So yeah, I was supposed to be on medication. But over time with integration, and I'm not saying this is a path for everyone, but this was my specific case and my specific anxiety and my specific depression. And I learned in AA, well, there was a concept in AA that you were spiritually sick. That was the issue you were having, is that you were spiritually sick. And I do believe that that's what it was. You can have that conversation without God if you need to. And just know that your soul, your whole is just out of whack. And I started to learn these anxieties as calls to action. And these are important. That's an important phrase. Because, and when you start seeing it as a call to action, you can almost, and I would even, not trying to sound like mystical about it, Because it's not. Or it is, or it isn't at the same time. Both, right? It's very compelling. I don't know how convincing this part is, but it feels, at this point, my anxiety is an intuition. I almost feel like revelations. And they're not so that heavy, but sometimes like when I started to actually try to listen, and I was going off on a limb because I was so tired of this, dealing with this constant battle. That one time I was waiting to go to a job interview, and my anxiety was like, something was telling me just stay. But Ricky, I wanted to go to this interview. But something said, just sit down. And I did. And there was a little bench outside of the house that I was staying at the time. And like 2 minutes later, I hear a big old thump in the house. And I walk inside, and the parents of the people I was staying with, they were elderly, so they were staying back with their kids. And so she was, in her 80s, and she had fallen. And now this woman is very religious, like pray in the closet, religious, respect. But, and I came in and grabbed her. Luckily, I was able to. And the very first thing she said to me was, "Thank you for listening to God." Now, she had no reason to say that besides her own religious conviction. She didn't know I didn't go somewhere because I was trying to fight this thing. And it caught me so bad because I was like, why did you say that? I didn't ask her, obviously, but I was like, why did she say that? Why did she say that then? You could have almost said that at any other time, but the exact circumstances that I was there, and this happens, and then this happens, it's like, wow. And that's compelling. Okay, we don't have to be at convincing yet. So then I started to take my anxieties as calls, whatever that means, and like letting me know I need to do something. And this was all as I was developing an understanding of Jung. So, integration and shadow work was in the ether. It was something I was thinking about. I didn't know how to do it. I just had an understanding of the shadow. I had an understanding of integration. And I had an understanding of Jung's mysticism. All with his very grounded work. But little by little, I found that these anxieties were leading me places, getting things done in my life, truly. Things that I would have never imagined happening. I mean, I'm married. In my own house. I'm sober. It's like, wow. And I'm not sober through willpower. I'm sober through perspective. It's the same, with this example, I can close the window, I can close the blinds again. But in my mind, I can't. Once I've seen something to be true or false, right, if it's like an epiphany kind of thing, I can't go back. And Jung really lays down what that journey will be like. It's a lot of self-discovery, and it's a lot of fear. And then you find out you have a lot of fear. And that all of these anxieties, to me, my anxieties are holding me accountable. I say words that I freaking hate saying sometimes because it makes me feel like an asshole. But I really had to adopt integrity into my life. We all know it as a concept. So I'm not trying to say I was just born naturally as a person with this huge amount of integrity. But I noticed that when I wasn't living that way, I could date it back for as far as I can. But when I wasn't living that way, I was suffering. I call that I was sick. And I say it today, if I'm getting off that path, if I'm being mean to people, I start getting sick. It's a domino effect. And so as I was learning integration, I was still struggling with alcohol because I wasn't completely like out the woods. It was still really hard because I didn't know how to live this. I knew how to live that, but I didn't know how to live this. And over time, integration took me down paths of finding my fears because I had to chase the anxiety. Otherwise, it was going to control me. So I had to follow it. Where did it lead me, And it led me to a lot of places. I really mean that. I mean, there's all you can really do, I guess, is take my word for it. But I have a feeling if you're listening, then you have a concept of this, and at least you have a hope for it. And integration and shadow work took me down a lot of fears that half gallon of whiskey a day. And when I tell that to people, even in AA, when I was in there, they didn't believe me, right? I was, in AA, they teach you that you're powerless over the alcohol. I very much learned fast that I was powerless over myself. And through shadow work and integration, if I haven't said that enough yet, I built that self-esteem, I built that self-respect that I didn't have and that alcohol was giving me. So it was a mixture of learning that, alcohol had a bit of a grip, but also that I was using it for strength. And something in me after that veil had pulled back, I couldn't go back anymore. The alcohol made me stronger. I didn't think I needed it to be strong. And how that integration works is just how I said. How it worked for me was running towards my anxieties, not suffering from them anymore. Like, what do you want? What do you mean? And facing it with courage is the best way to do it. And I'm not even trying to say I'm not fucking afraid of it all the time, but you have to be brave. And I've said that in a video already. It's one of the most important things that I have now. And I learned to be brave through integration, because otherwise I learned that I'm very afraid of things. How do you integrate in a world where things are scary? There takes a little bit of trusting yourself even when it's hard. It takes a little bit of loving yourself even when it's hard. But then you realize that the part of you that's hard to love yourself is like the shadow, and you have a reason. And if you can grab it and identify it, you can start to work towards it. One of the best things about being labeled an alcoholic for that time was that it gave me something to look at. Integration wasn't as clear. I mean, unless you're listening. And because it doesn't, there's not I didn't find an integration group that I could go to. I had to do it alone. And that came with a lot of humility. And, the fun thing is throughout the way I found a God that I couldn't even deny. And, I have seen a Carl Jung interview where he expressed something similar, where they said, do you believe in God? He said, I don't believe in God anymore. I know. And I feel like I've fallen somewhere in there too. It's one of the ones that I'm convinced of. It's past compelling, I'm convinced, but I still can't explain it. And that's what makes it so remarkable, is it always comes in ways that I can never understand. All the life that I have now is not, I don't want to say it's not that I don't want to say it. It's almost, I can't even attribute it to, my will or my smarts. I have a little bit of wisdom through a lot of mistakes, and that mixed with a good teacher allowed me to start to fix the things about myself. And that's not as vague as it sounds. I can say, help me fix my fucking anxiety, but what's that going to mean to you? you will know what those things are. And if you don't, trust me, they'll pop up and you'll get the chance to work on it. That's the one thing I found, is that's a constant. You know that the only option is courage at some point. And that's what integration showed me. That's what shadow work showed me, is that I realized here I am again at a fork in the road. And through some psychedelics, I'll admit I had some help. And honestly, I don't want to say that you can't do it without psychedelics. I'm not. But I want to say that my background, I feel like I probably would have never gotten there unless psychedelics really, until psychedelics really put me, until I couldn't deny it anymore. And psychedelics put me in a space where I couldn't deny it. And what sucks about the psychedelics thing is you can't stay on psychedelics all the time. You gotta come down, right? You got to. So you gotta be sober. And what didn't happen with me when I did psychedelics is everything went away. I mean, in the moment, it was great. Like, colors are cool, man. Colors are cool. But you know what was super cool about psychedelics? I was happy. And I can't even say happy. I just didn't have this tense. I was at peace. And that was the most blessed part of it. And then things would happen, and I was just fortunate enough to see that, oh, that would have pissed me off, but I actually don't feel anything to, almost, I'm just giving it love instead of being upset. And, and you sit there and you cry, you have a good cry, you wake up the next day, and all of a sudden you're madder than you've ever been. Or it seems that way. But I eventually started to realize I'm not madder than I ever been. It didn't come back stronger. It just came back. Or I went back. However you want to say it. So since the truth of the matter was that I could be in these situations without feeling this vice grip on my fucking temples, I knew then that it was possible. And with enough years of just knowing integration and shadow work, I started to understand that I choose. This is like my base setting almost. To be over it, to be frustrated, or to be impatient, to deny. And that was a really rough couple weeks, because I realized in all those weeks, I just realized how much of an asshole I was, and I'm saying that with as much grace to myself as I can really give, because I understand what that guy's saying. He has a point, but just know he's been through some shit, and he's a little tired, and he's a little angry. He survived, so he's a little emboldened, but I'm trying to get him to chill, because, the adult, I'm here now, and I would like to be the one at the wheel, not my ego. I don't believe there's an ego death, and if you ever hear anyone say they have the ego death, run away from them. Ego is the only thing that can convince you that you're powerful enough to kill it. What do you think about that? But yeah, so integration, Jung integration. Accepting things that just irk me, but instead of them irking, instead of just thinking they irk me, figuring out why it irks me. So this last thing that happened, I was so frustrated, and I could be right to be frustrated. I try to be a very authentic person. It's not like a model I choose to be. It's just, if I'm not, I get sick. So when I'm not able to exist without the need of performance or mask from them, if I can't be me because I know it's going to be a problem, which fine, I've accepted that about myself, but it's hard for me to mask now because I don't do it anymore. I masked when I was too weak to accept who I was. Now I love myself too much to mask. And that is one of the peaks that I came up and seen another valley, because I had self-respect and self-love, and I stand up for myself, and I push these people out of the way. Sometimes it comes down to pushing people you didn't deserve to be pushed. And that's when that peak you realize is just another valley. Because the very thing that got you to survive and overcome the last mountain is now going to be one of your biggest weaknesses moving forward. You know what I mean? But that's where integration has stayed a steady part in my life, because I kind of just get to just keep going through this motion of self-actualization. I have a real embodiment issue. I don't feel like I belong here. I feel like I want to go back home all the time. And it's not suicidal ideation. I've been through too much therapy, and it's cognitive behavioral therapy especially, which I'll do a video on that probably too, but it's not suicidal ideation. But I just always feel like I want to go back home. And I've never had a home so much, so I don't have this earthly idea of what that means. I just want to go back home, I'm homesick. And Jung has just really helped me not feel so alienated, because there's a certain part, they say it in AA and Jung says it too. We are a particular, people who find themselves in substances, people who find themselves feeling this God-sized hole in their life with anything that they can fit. Those people are the ones that especially need the connection the most. They need love, they need validation, they need accepted, because nothing else is going to do it. They're not probably not going to get it. It's so hard to even still get it from myself now, but I live a life through integrity, and I'm not act like a good person, but I live my life in such a way where I don't give myself too many options to hate myself anymore. I do the things I need to do, and I'm not saying I'm perfect about it, but I know if I don't, it's a life or death sentence. And I've only got there through integration and perspective, not willpower. No Ubermensch mentality was going to get me over that. It was just going to kill me. If it wasn't for Jung and really being able to soften my heart towards myself, that I was then able to give love and really work on being able to receive it.